So let's see if I can share my screen. So many odd things happen.
We can see slides now.
Okay, great. So let's see if I apologize for all the technical things that happening. So we should be fine. Okay, so as you see, our today's hosts are Amelia Letvin, Susan House, and Dr. Ankush Singh, and I'm Moones Alamooti, and I would be the moderator of today's webinar. So let's have a brief introduction with our host, Miss Susan House. I guess everybody should know her because she had a very great workshop for us for the resume building, and we received so much positive feedback on that. So students are looking for much more workshop. So you know that she's a VP engineering at Subsurface Consultant and Associate in Houston, Texas. And she's graduated with a petroleum engineering at the University of Texas. She joined the Andarco, holding roles in the reservoir engineering, business development, corporate engineering, and of course the human resource. And she also joined the Chevron as manager of the Horizon program and served as reservoir management consultant at Chevron. So she's an industry leader in talent attraction, development, and retention. She also has co-authored different articles on the topic of ethics, uncertainty management, and risk management. She's a distinguished alumni committee and served on UTPG External Advisory Board, Colorado School of Mines, Department Program Advisory Board, Girl Scouts of San Jacinto Council Board of Directors, and Society Petroleum Engineer. She served also as the SP Regional Director for Gulf Coast North America, received the SPE de Galeria Distinguished Service Medal, and she's an honorary member of SPE, and she was also an SP Distinguished Lecturer for 2019-2020. She also received the 2020 Woman of Excellence Award from the Federation of Houston Professional Women. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here with us today. Our next host is Dr. Ankush Singh. He's a senior consultant engineer at ResFrac Corporation. His work involves integrating concepts from geomechanics, geophysics, and reservoir engineering in solving field-scale problems related to unconventional and geothermal projects. He received his Ph.D. in geophysics from Stanford University in 2021. His thesis was focused on predicting variation of stress with depth and analyzing its impact on hydraulic fracture propagation and fault sleep. He utilized physics-based modeling and machine learning for geomechanical application in unconventional, in-house geothermal system, and induced seismicity. He also received a master's degree in geology from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay in 2010. And he also worked as a geoscientist at Shell for 6 years at various international locations, including India, Russia, and New Zealand. His role was focused on performing geological modeling, uncertainty quantification, and value of information analysis for global oil and gas fields. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for being here today with us. So our next host is Amelia Letvin, and I believe that everybody now in the conference should know her. She's an active member of the WING, Women in Geothermal, She's working with numerous companies on projects that range from geothermal, exploration drilling to environmental remediation, geophysical mapping, and geothermal think tank. Her work included a 3D seismic survey in Western Oklahoma, the map cards formation for planned wind turbine, and environmental investigation into hex chrome contamination around military sites, and an environmental review of RCRA site with elevated halogenated solvent levels. And she also, because she is a geological consultant, she worked for different companies. Thank you, Amelia, to be here with us today. So this is, I believe, that what students should know. You can get involved on a social media platform, and we have different platforms from LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course our email address that you can communicate with us. So, being said that, I believe that now we can start our webinar by asking question from our panelists. So I start asking the question from Dr. Singh. How was your transition from an undergraduate student to a graduate student? Did you ever consider applying to a job as an undergrad or changing career path?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say that it's a great initiative from the Geothermal Rising Students Committee. It's a topic about which students don't often get exposure. So appreciate that you have organized this. Also look forward to hearing what Susan and Amelia have to say and to listen to their perspectives. This question is rather complex for me since I've done the transition multiple times in multiple ways. So I transitioned from being a professional to being a graduate student and then back again. So in my experience, yeah, I would rather say the hardest transition for me was from being a professional to being a grad student again, but that's a story for another day. So I'd like to say in terms of a transitioning from being an undergrad student to a grad student, I feel that most important thing is choosing the people you want to work with carefully, especially for students trying to do a PhD. I often feel that that aspect of the people you want to work with gets a bit underappreciated when people are trying to choose where they want to go. I think personal compatibility plays a major role. For example, as a student, when you want to be a grad student, some people prefer working with advisors who are micromanagers, for example. Others prefer working with people who kind of give them more free space. So I've always felt that it's more important to talk to a lot of people to kind of make personal connections, which always makes transitions really easier, whether it's from undergrad to graduate student or from industry to graduate student in my case. So if I have to give one advice, it would be that. Another thing is for the second part of the question, whether I considered working after the undergrad. So I started working directly after my master's degree. It was the job prospects and the situation in India at the time was such that I never considered a job right after undergrad, and it was an automatic transition from an undergrad to a master's. But after having interacted with a lot of my colleagues in the industry, I think it's kind of, if you have the opportunity, it's often a great thing to get some work experience directly after your undergrad, if the job market is right and you get the opportunities, because coming into grad school, I felt that my experience in the industry kind of prepared me and had me know about what the real world problems are that I can focus on grad school. So unless you're focused on this is the particular grad program I want to do, if you're confused, then I think it might be a great thing to go out into the industry, get some work experience, and then decide if you want to do a grad program and what grad program you want to do in, because that kind of gets your connection to the real world and kind of prepares your mind to decide on what problems you want to solve eventually while doing your PhD or master's or further in your career.
That was really great. Amelia, my second question goes for you. How was the transition for you from being a student to a new hire, and how would you describe the corporate culture?
Well, I I have a different story from Dr. Singh in that I took a break between undergrad and graduate school. When I finished my undergraduate degree, I did not think I'd go back for a master's. I was done. And I started working in environmental remediation. So this was in the early 2000s. And in 2009, there was what is now being called the Great Recession. And a lot of environmental departments were cut. And I was laid off and decided to pivot my career. So it was a good time to reflect on what I really wanted to do. And instead of doing environmental remediation for oil and gas companies, I wanted to invest my energy into a cleaner energy resource, and geothermal was my answer. So it was, for me, it was good to take that time to know better what I really wanted to pursue. And when I entered the workforce after grad school, so what I would say about the geothermal industry is there isn't a defined corporate culture. There are large companies like Baker Hughes, Halliburton, Schlumberger, and then there's a lot of much smaller companies. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. I didn't really consider it, and I found that I have a strong preference among that. Some people do really well in large structured companies, and some people do much better in smaller personal companies where you can easily talk to the CEO or the owner of the company. And yeah, I think that's a really important thing to consider when you're applying for jobs is what appeals to you. And also, larger companies like the Baker Hughes and Halliburtons have incredible training programs. So it could be good to start off in a big company and then transition to a smaller company where once you have established a good foundation and you're better able to voice your input. And something I would highly recommend for transitioning is to look into what kind of state certifications are available in your area. There might be like a HAZWOPER or which is hazardous waste operations, or professional geologist or professional engineer. And these were things that didn't even cross my my desk when I was in school. And when you enter the workforce, they're very highly regarded, and you get to add some letters after your name. So I recommend looking into those.
That was actually very helpful, specifically for students, because I know that they always have the opportunity to take advantage of different training. And I guess that this suggestion is really, really good for them. My next question is for Susan. I know that you work as like HR, talent attractor. So my question is that what if I'm graduating the next year with a, let's say, geoscience or engineering related major, and I want to work right away? Do I need to go to the graduate school to find a job in energy industry, or what other opportunities are there for me?
That's certainly a great question. And I would say even before the year that you are planning to graduate, students should be looking for internships. Great way to explore all these possibilities. It gives you a chance to really get to understand what Amelia was talking about, the different cultures of a large company versus a small company versus a service company, or maybe you work in government. So don't miss out on those opportunities. And some students are able to get internships as early as their freshman year. So just because you're an underclassman, don't think you can't get an internship. I had 3 internships when I was in my bachelor's degree, and it really helped me because I worked for 2 summers for a large company, and then the 3rd summer I worked for a smaller company, and that was the company I ended up joining, Anadarko, which used to be a small company, and then it grew to be a big company. So things change over time. So I would say when you're thinking about graduate school, the answer might be different depending on which type of company you would like to join, and also which type of degree you have for your undergraduate degree. For most geoscientists, I think it's strongly recommended they pursue at least a master's level education. For both Anadarko and Chevron, two large operators, and they required the students to have a master's in geoscience before they would hire them. Whereas for engineering, the answer is different. You a well-qualified job with a bachelor's degree, and it somewhat depends on this type of company that you're working for. A larger company like Chevron might really appreciate you have a master's or a PhD, whereas a smaller company, it might be a nice to have, but not a requirement. So use those internships to explore the type of company you would like to join, and then tailor your education plan to match what that company requires. That would be my best advice.
That was really great. So Amelia, what do you find most enjoyable in your job?
Well, this is I'm going to talk about the before times, before COVID. My job included a lot of travel, working in international projects. And my most favorite part about that, because I didn't get to do a lot of tourist things like any sightseeing, but I would work with local people and get to know them on a personal level and find out things we had in common. You know, around the world, everybody loves to tell a good story. They love to hear a good joke, and pretty much everyone loves soccer. So, you know, and it's just great to share and connect. And also in geothermal, we're all after the same thing. Like, we're trying to get more geothermal energy online, and for a lot of places outside the US, getting geothermal can make you energy independent. So it changes the trajectory and just their own energy. And that's outside of, you know, I was usually working on a rig, but when I would interact with people in stores and restaurants, everybody appreciates that. They're like, yes, we need energy independence. We have to stop importing from our neighbors. So that's, yeah, I don't know what it will be next in the COVID years. We'll see.
So Dr. Singh, you have like the now experience of working in the geothermal industry, and beforehand you had the experience of working for Shell. So what are like some career alternative for the geothermal students, or what type of jobs can I pursue outside the energy industry?
Yeah, I think so. For this question, I've been trying to see where all the students from my cohort have started working, and so there are a variety of opportunities for students in geosciences or engineering who are related to geothermal, because there are a lot of skills that you get that involve data visualization, handling uncertainties that are applicable. One obvious one is the data science, software, machine learning field. I know a lot of friends who kind of made the transition from working in geothermal or subsurface related masters or PhDs, and they kind of gained the skills of using machine learning and handling uncertainty, and they kind of ended up at getting jobs at places even like Walmart or Facebook or such companies. So that's one avenue which, and also like to excuse me. Also like to say, for international students, often that's the software and the machine learning side is one area where you have lesser problems with visa especially in more niche fields. What you have is smaller companies, when they're not aware about the visa, that international students might face some problems especially those who are on an OPT. So that's one thing to consider as well. I've also seen a lot of jobs which are related to geospatial analysis, so a lot of jobs which are related to sustainability and land use that kind of require you to have general geospatial analysis skills. On LinkedIn, I just saw a job called spectral geologist, which was for a sustainability company looking for land use patterns and algorithms for that. And I think even in the energy industry, there are a number of jobs outside of the subsurface for people who are looking for alternatives. If you just do a search on LinkedIn for like an energy analyst position, there are a number of positions for utilities, for utility consultancies, think tanks like the Rocky Mountain Institute. These jobs vary in about the expectations of your background and experience, but most of them require basic quantitative skills and kind of data visualization skills. And I've from my friends, I've also seen that often when they mention the numbers of years of experience required, they're a bit flexible with that, as long as you have the basic sort of skill set in your toolbox. So if you're looking for alternatives, you can also reach out to the other energy industry other than the subsurface as well, because some of the skills are pretty transferable and there are a lot of jobs available in that sector.
Great, and I'm sure that the students gonna ask questions about that.
Yeah.
So Susan, what developments on the horizon could affect the future opportunities in your opinion?
So certainly those of us in the energy industry watch different price points for various commodities. We've been encouraged to see some of the natural gas prices and oil prices is bringing drilling back. And I think there's also quite a bit of interest in various minerals that are involved in some of the renewables. And so we're watching the supply chain for all the components that go into our cars, and likewise that impacts other industries as well. So I would say in general, be aware of the global market that we live in today. No one is isolated, and no one can really be, it's hard to predict the future. It's a very complex economic situation, but certainly be aware of different opportunities that may arise. There may be advantages to the renewables as the price of oil and gas goes up, because all of a sudden people are paying more for heating their homes or driving their cars. So they may be looking for alternatives there. And so I would say it's important for students to remain tuned in to different sources of information. Don't just rely on your own social media feed to keep up with world news. Maybe pick up some other sources in addition to that. There's some great areas where you can watch all the information. And from what I can see at the local schools here in the United States, students who are graduating in May would expect to receive job offers. I think jobs are back, and there will be an opportunity for strong employment for this graduating next May, and there are plenty of students getting internship offers as well. So it seems like things are headed the right direction, at least.
So Dr. Singh, could you describe for us one of your typical work day?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think that typical work days, it varies a lot of where you're working. My typical work day at Shell was really different to my typical work day at ResFrac. So one of the perks of working remotely, so I really enjoy the kind of the flexibility to work remotely, is that I live in a beach town very close to San Diego. I don't have to be in in bigger cities, so I can be at a nice location. So I would say a major part of my job involves critical thinking. So I kind of try to, when we have a project that involves solving a problem either in unconventionals or in geothermal, what we try to do is replicate the reality in our models by using observations to calibrate the models. And and kind of a major part of the job is to get the intuition in terms of physics as what's happening on the subsurface, how can the problem be solved. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of the thinking time where you're actually kind of formulating the problem in your head, and once that is fixed, the problem solution often comes really quickly. So yeah, that's a major part of the job. And I think in the industry, compared to academia, there's more multitasking. So you're working on multiple things at one time. We often have a couple of meetings per day, reviews with either clients or internally within the organization. So that's all, part of it. And also, I guess it's also in a typical work, they try to fit in a bit of work-life balance. Again, one of the perks of working remotely is try to fit in a run or a sort of a break in between. So I'm like ready to go for the next work session. Kind of that's the overall working day I've been experiencing.
That sounds interesting. So Susan, I'm sure that you get this question a lot from the students. What educational preparation would you recommend for someone who wants to broaden their experience in the geothermal or energy field? And are there any extracurricular activities that have any positive impact on being employed in the energy industry?
Great question. I think from an educational perspective, to begin with, focus on getting good grades in the degree you've selected. Make sure you're not too distracted by all the extracurricular activities. But if you want to augment that degree, you might consider getting a minor. There are a lot of universities now that are offering minors in data analytics or minors in sustainability, and both offered at University of Texas, for instance. Or you might even consider, once you've gotten the bachelor's degree, you might consider certificate programs. A certificate is like half a master's. And for a lot of the universities, they're using these to attract students while they are employed. And many times your employer will support that effort. And so you take maybe 15 or 18 hours and you get a certificate in a certain topic that's a specialty topic that maybe wasn't covered in depth in your undergraduate. And then, of course, going on to do master's with research or a PhD with research is wonderful. A lot of undergraduate students don't realize that there are opportunities for undergraduate research. And so look for those, because sometimes they're not widely disseminated. But I know that many universities work hard to attract strong students into their graduate program. And so they use these undergraduate research opportunities as ways to it's almost like an internship. They can see how you perform in a workplace setting and see how you'll do in a graduate level assignment or research assistant job. So look for those opportunities. In addition, I would say that many universities have societies, professional societies with student chapters like Geothermal Rising. Look for some of the other ones. Most of the engineering professions have some sort of professional society, and then there are lots of societies that are cross-disciplinary that may cover different aspects of, say, renewables or other topics that you're interested in. So look for groups that you can join, become involved, and take a leadership role, because what recruiters are really looking for is people who have invested some time and effort in those organizations. Thanks.
Thank you. So Amelia, my next question is for you. I know that you're an active member of the Women in Geothermal, and I would like to know what challenges do women face in the scientific and engineering profession, and how did you tackle those challenges?
It's a good question. And there are a lot of challenges that women face. And I would say what's really helped me is to be resilient and also to be kind to yourself. There's a lot of opportunities, or there's a lot of occasions where I've been the only woman on a work site where I can feel very isolated and it can be lonely. And you got to rely on yourself for internal strength. In addition to that, I would say support what Susan just talked about. Joining other organizations, that's a support group, that's a network. Those are people that you can connect to who might have a similar experience, that if you're alone in one place and somebody else is alone somewhere else, you know, you're in it together. So that's a big part of what I love about Wing is just connecting people who might feel like you're isolated. Also, I would say be bold. And I know that it's a thing that people might not be comfortable with, you know, it's a personality thing, but put yourself into an uncomfortable position and be bold, you know, like speak your voice. Don't be afraid to be heard and to speak up if something's not right. And if you're not comfortable, like stand up for yourself. So those are my words of wisdom. And also shameless plug, join Wing.
Of course. So how about you, Dr. Singh? What have you found most challenging in your career path?
I think one of the things that a lot of students kind of find challenging in the beginning is that often the industry focuses on the 80% solution mindset and being fit for purpose, whereas often in academia, this is especially true for PhD students, they have committees or advisors who are looking for the other 20%. So that's often a mindset where students, when they go into industry, have tried to do each and everything kind of to perfection, whereas in the industry, it's what's needed to solve this particular problem rather than just going in depth and trying to understand everything about everything. So that's kind of in switching from industry back to academia, back to industry is something it's switching that mindset is often, it takes time. And it's often good to have mentors who are able to sort of help you out with that and kind of explain things to you that, well, okay, this is where you're doing too much. Efficiency is a big buzzword in the industry. In academia, it's more about being in depth. So that's something in the transition that I have often found to be challenging. But yeah, it's I think the key has been to in finding mentors and people whom you can talk to and then who help you through the process. I've also had, I guess it's not really a challenge, but a confusing time for a major part of my PhD is in trying to decide between industry and academia for my future. And I've found that it's hard because there was a time during my PhD when I was changing my mind every month. And I've found from other people that it's not so uncommon. So so again, don't be harsh on yourself is one of the keys. It's okay to be confused. Not going to have the answers, and accepting that, well, sometimes you may not be 100% sure about everything, but you got to give it a try and then see how it goes is just a part of the process. So don't be harsh on yourself. Take a chance and see how it goes.
Great. So Amelia, you're now in the conference, and I'm sure that you participated in different talks and presentation. Do you think that the geothermal field is growing enough so there would be room for the recent graduate students?
Well, I want to first say that my experience in the geothermal industry so far has been that there are swells and then compressions of work, of investment, of government funding and incentives. So it's not going to be steady and constant. However, I do think that we are on the cusp of a huge wave. I think especially in the US, I assume there's many international people here, but the the current administration has promised to put a lot of investment into renewables, and worldwide, there's just a lot more awareness of climate change and the need for sustainable energy resources. And I think it's a really exciting time to get into the industry. So welcome.
This is a great hope for all the students. So Susan, what qualification do you seek in a new hire?
I think many employers that are hiring in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and math, are looking for people who can solve difficult problems. We don't always know what those problems will be over our career, but we're looking for people who have experience with technical challenges. And so in many cases, try to structure your internships and even your volunteer work so that you have time to immerse yourself in those problem-solving activities, because those are great practice for the work world once you finish your education. And I would say in addition to that, employers universally are looking for people with good communication skills. And so that may be written communication, it may be oral communication, it may be through social media these days. We have so many ways we can communicate, but take the time to develop your communication skills and learn how to write strong technical papers. Many students can practice with technical paper writing and student paper contests, and there's plenty of professionals who will mentor you in those areas. And so in addition to that, when recruiters are scanning through all those resumes that they have looked through to decide they're going to select for interviews, they're looking for students who are balanced. They don't just have academic students, but they also have extracurricular activities. There's clubs and organizations they're involved in. Maybe they're involved in sort of community service, and that they've had experience being a team member as well as being a leader, because companies need both. If they hired only leaders, then it would be hard to get anything done. So we look for good teamwork skills, good leadership skills, communication skills, problem-solving skills, and of course, work experience. If you can get solid, relatable work experience, that makes for a good resume. Thanks for the question.
Great. So Dr. Singh, I know that you mentioned that you have like a struggling time choosing between academia and also industry. So how did you find out what you were truly passionate about in your career?
That's a good question, and it's really hard, I guess, in a way, because I've also found that what you're truly passionate about in your career changes over time in your career as well. What you're truly passionate about maybe today may change after maybe a few years of work experience. For example, after my master's in geology, I was really passionate about field geology and sedimentology, and I kind of enjoyed working there, but then kind of I became more interested in things I'm doing now related to geomechanics and more numerical stuff. I think, again, there's a question in the chat as well, which is similar about what students should do if they're struggling to kind of decide on what they want to do. So I think the two questions are kind of linked. I think often to find out what you're truly passionate about, you just have to try something. So sometimes you don't know what you're passionate about because you haven't really tried that thing, and it's maybe out there. So if you're confused, just there's no harm in when you find a good position in an organization with people that you like working with. Often that experience kind of helps you discover your true potential and passion. So kind of I'll also lay emphasis on the fact that if you find good people in a good environment to work with, you're more likely to maybe find out what you're passionate about rather than maybe at the other place where you are not that comfortable. So kind of look for that balance in trying out something which you think you may be interested in, and get the right sort of the environment and the people around you who would make you like realize what you're truly passionate about. So I've kind of given a roundabout answer, but yeah.
So my next question is for Susan. What would you say help you to have a successful career and find a job in the energy industry?
So that's a pretty broad question, but let me talk about a article that I wrote about 10 years ago. My co-author was Liz Schwartzy. She's now VP of Exploration at Chevron. And we wrote about career management tools. And you can find that article in my LinkedIn profile if you're interested. We wrote it for The Way Ahead, the journal for young professionals for SPE. And I think there's some great tools that you can use to manage your career proactively. One, of course, is a resume. A lot of people think that they need a resume when they're looking for a job, but after they land the job, they don't need to keep that resume up to date. Well, take some time once a year and put your resume in order and capture some of your accomplishments each year on your resume. Because if you try to do it after 5 years or 10 years or longer, it's going to be hard to remember. So let that be part of your annual career maintenance as you update your resume. The other document you should have is a performance management plan. Some big companies have this already in place, but if you're at a small company, you and your supervisor sit down at the start of each year and make a plan for what are your key job responsibilities. And then at the end of the year, you review how you did. And that's a great thing to do. It's a simple document. It can be 1 page, but it helps you to stay on track. And sometimes the company's goals change, they change direction. And so your manager can help you to change your goals so they're aligned with the company's goals. So you might even need to have a mid-year course correction on that 1-year plan. And then the third document that you're going to have is a career development plan. And this is a multi-year plan where you start to look ahead. What are the jobs that you're currently qualified for within your company, lateral jobs that you could move to? And what are some stretch jobs? Maybe they're 2 pay grades above you, but you still have hopes that you'll get there someday, and start to develop the skills that are required for those stretch assignments, the ones that you can't quite see yourself in yet, but you'd like to get there someday. And so with those 3 documents, the resume, the performance management plan, and the career development plan, they reinforce each other. Because as you accomplish things, you put them on your resume. As you get new jobs, you put those on your resume, and then you realign the career development plan and the performance management plan. And look for the article. It gives you much more detail.
I really appreciate you for answering this broad question in an impressive way. So Amelia, what would you tell your younger student or new hire self?
I would say get involved and stay involved, which is something that the other speakers have mentioned, to, participate in groups, join organizations, take classes, lifelong learning, keep expanding your network. A lot of times you'll meet people who can completely change your career trajectory, and ask them important questions. Like Dr. Singh was talking about, a lot of uncertainty when you're entering the workforce. Ask other people, like, how did you decide? What were your inspirations? That's the most important thing that I would recommend to myself. And also to, I don't know, enjoy the ride.
So before moving to the question, which is for all the panelists, I would like to say that you can put your, I know that we have a couple questions on our QA. You can put your question on the chat or Q&A. And after these 2 questions, we come back to those questions that you ask. And I'm sure that our panelists gonna answer them one by one. So my question for all panelists is that, what are your hopes for the future of the geothermal industry? So Susan, we can start from you.
I think the geothermal industry is a wonderful opportunity for many of us to establish resilience for energy security in many countries. I previously worked for Chevron. Chevron is one of the largest producers of geothermal in the world, with assets in Indonesia and the Philippines. And so I do see that there's a bright future for geothermal. I'm also a petroleum engineer that has solar on my house. And so I believe in using all types of energy. We're going to continue to need oil and gas. We need solar, we need geothermal, we need wind. We need probably some things that haven't been invented yet, but we need people with innovation that can help us to find safe, reliable, clean, and cheap energy for our future, to keep our way of living the way we enjoy it. Thanks for the question.
How about you, Dr. Singh? What do you think?
I think I have really high hopes from the geothermal industry. I'm especially a big proponent of EGS, enhanced geothermal systems, and I think they have a big role to play in the future. I think all the projects right now, like the Forge project, and then there are a couple going on in Europe as well, like the Pedretto project, I think. So we are at the time where we are starting to go at the pilot scale of things in EGS, and I'm really hopeful that once these projects are successful, that things are going to move at the field scale really quickly. So this might these projects might provide the push that the EGS sector needs to become more mainstream and to become a significant contributor. And as Susan said, we need as diverse energy supply as possible. And I think EGS and geothermal in general is going to be a key part of that. I just hope that there continues to be policy support for EGS and for geothermal in general, and because that's something that is required and kind of is going to help push geothermal more and more into the mainstream.
How about you, Amelia? What do you think?
So I'm here on site at the conference, and I've heard so many exciting innovations that are coming down the pipeline. I'm really excited about the lithium extraction potential, and also the more wide acceptance of ground source heat pumps. So I believe that the ground source heat pumps can make geothermal accessible for people who don't live near active fault lines. And I was on the field trip to the Imperial Valley on Saturday, where they discussed the pilot projects for lithium extraction, and said that it has the potential to produce double what they are making from geothermal. So they would essentially be a lithium producer with geothermal as a nice byproduct. So these are pretty exciting things that I hope happen in the near future. And I should also add, if you saw my plenary talk, that I have hopes of geothermal leading the way as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have had many people approach me after that talk saying, I would never see this type of presentation in a oil and gas conference. So I think it's really exciting that we're confronting this head on.
This is so great. And my last question to all panelists is that, as a professional, what advice do you give to the students? So let's start from Dr. Singh.
Yeah, I think so. First advice is talk to as many people as you can. It's something both Susan and Amelia have also alluded to, is talk to potential mentors, role models. One thing you can do is, if you're confused about a career choice, is maybe have a role model and look at someone, and you can think that you would want to do what they're doing right now in a few years. So look at their career paths and trajectories. It's often not planned. Often people, you would see when you follow career trajectories of people that people move around, things change. And so, yeah, kind of develop the confidence that, yeah, it doesn't have to go in a linear plan, but things might change, and just be comfortable with that. And also, in addition to having long-term goals, I think it's also important to have really short-term goals, especially in terms of learning. So if you want to learn a new software or learn a new skill, so have like a goal at the scale of a few months or a few weeks, and constantly keep yourself updated, learning new tools and skills. And that's really important because any industry these days is evolving rapidly with the new tools that are available. So you just try to adapt along with it and just be at the cutting edge of what's happening right now in the industry. So that's one advice that I would give to all the students.
How about you, Amelia? What suggestion do you have for the students?
Well, to reiterate what we have already discussed, getting involved and expanding your network, but I would also emphasize diversifying your network. So, you know, Geothermal Rising is a great group. You should be part of that, but also what are your other interests? You know, perhaps there's a local energy group. You should try to find something that's close to home. And then there's also international groups, and there for women, there are women empowerment groups. And I think it's really important to not just have one avenue that you stick to and rely on. Have many avenues that you can explore, just like your stock options. Diversify.
And how about you, Susan? What are your recommendations for the students?
So I think it's important to realize that you're going to need throughout your career mentors and sponsors, and those are two different things. So make sure you understand the difference. I recently co-authored a paper that was presented at the SP annual conference in Dubai by my co-author, Maria Angela Capello, and Yves Brunt was also one of our co-authors. You'll find that link in my LinkedIn site as well. And we believe that it's going to be really important throughout your career, whichever direction you choose to go, to continually have opportunities to seek out mentors. And you may need to have a different mentor for different aspects of your career. So not the same mentor for your whole career, but a series of mentors. And then you also need to have good sponsors in whatever organization you're involved in. And those are the people that are going to help you to rise to the level to which you aspire. And you may not even know that they're your sponsors, but they're being your angel behind the scenes, helping you to make sure that your name comes up when important positions are being discussed. So know the difference between mentors and sponsors. Have a strong network so you can reach out and find mentors when you need them. And sometimes you'll find mentors outside your work organization, maybe through a professional society like Geothermal Rising or some other professional society. Don't take them for granted. A lot of people think that networking is really just being social. Well, no, it's really about building relationships, and those relationships matter, and they will be there for you throughout your career. So make sure you are always working on building those relationships and keeping them strong. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So I guess that now it's time to go for the questions of our attendees. I don't see any question in the chat, but we have a couple of questions in our QA. So I start with the question of Garang. He's asking, is it safe for a student to establish a company immediately after graduation as part of transitioning to profession, or can investor or donors accept to give grant to fresh graduates to establish the company?
So I'll jump in on that one, because we're seeing students who are starting companies before they graduate. So don't let a degree stop you from doing something entrepreneurial. If you have a passion for an idea, it may be something that you can do part-time while you're in school, and it may provide some needed income while you're looking for a full-time job. So yes, nothing should stop you if you have an idea from starting the company if you wish to do so.
So are there any other comments from the other panelists regarding that question?
I would just like to point out a few incredible examples of people who started jobs even before they graduated. The founder of Facebook is the first one that pops into my head.
Or
Mark
Michael
Zuckerberg.
Dell, the founder of Dell Computers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Started it in his dorm room. So don't let it slow you down.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go to the next question, which I believe is the question to Amelia. What future do you see for the job market in the geothermal? What trend do you see developing over the next few years?
I'm definitely seeing a trend towards computer literacy, like writing code, machine learning. There's a lot of great advancements in software and data processing. So I would say that's a very big and new developing field. And you know, there's still a need for engineers, geologists, but it's becoming much more, I wouldn't say mandatory, but just expected to have a certain amount of software literacy.
Are there any more comments on that question? Okay, I guess that Dr. Singh mentioned like how it was difficult to decide on a career choice adapt. But Amelia and Susan, do you have any other things to add what Dr. Singh has said?
Yeah, I think with career choices, it's important to ask people what they like about their career. If you put together that document that I described, a career development plan, and you ask someone in your organization, may I meet you for coffee and show you my career development plan, and you can tell me about your career, people love to talk about their own career. So that's an invitation that's hard to turn down. So I would reach out to people and ask them how they got to where they are.
And I would add on to that, once you're in a position and you have an idea of what you want, you can steer the direction. You can take on new responsibilities. You can talk to your supervisor or your team and say, you know, this is a need that I see and I'm interested in pursuing it. So once you know what there's a need for, you can work towards filling that need and becoming indispensable. And then there's also a lot more what do you call it? Satisfaction in the job, because you did it, you created it for yourself.
Great. So are there skills that are most important for a career in geothermal?
So I know we've talked about some of the technical skills, but I would also emphasize what we used to call soft skills. I've also heard those described as non-technical skills, or most recently, I've heard them described as durable skills. But these are the skills that will last throughout your career, even as you go into different positions. And those are really the things like critical thinking and communication skills and negotiating skills. These things are all critically important. Don't underestimate the need to have strong soft skills.
Amelia and Dr. Singh, do you have any more thing to add to that?
Yeah, I think fully agree with what Susan says. I think another thing I found is something that you aren't taught in school is stakeholder management. Is often in the industry projects, you have multiple stakeholders which you're trying to balance, maybe both within your organization and clients, or depending on where you are. Often in whether you're in a master's program or a PhD, you have you have your committee or your advisors whom you have to take into consideration. But then you in the industry, you often might have multiple people with multiple interests and multiple perspectives. So identifying on who's into a particular project with what perspective is important, and kind of the stakeholder management, I think, is kind of underappreciated as a skill when students kind of try to know what skills are needed in the industry.
Yeah, I think what the two other presenters have discussed are both top notch. The only thing I would add to that is to be polite. Manners are free, and it goes a long way if you're nice to the people you work with. Don't be a prima donna, don't be demanding. You don't want to be rude to a waitress because they've got your food. So be respectful to everybody.
This is actually a great point. And it doesn't really matter what you want to do, but this is what really matters. So I guess that we have a question from Jessica. She's asking if you have any advice on active but not aggressive networking.
Yes, my advice would be, remember that networking should be reciprocal. It's a two-way street. And so don't stalk somebody at a conference and go up and say, hey, how can you get me a job? Start out with a compliment. Say, I listened to your keynote speech today, and I really like that point you out in the blank, and tell them, that you're interested in something that they were interested in. And you might even ask a question. What are some of the technical challenges that your company is facing these days? And that might lead to a conversation that might lead to an interview, but don't start out with a, can you get me an interview? Think about how you can help them before they're going to help you. It's a two-way street.
Any other comments from the other panelists?
Yeah, I think another thing is, I think either Susan or Amelia mentioned that people love talking about their career journeys. And I've also found that in academia, professors love talking about their research. So if you reach out to someone trying to know more about what they are doing right now and how their journey was, or what their research is right now, that's something that is kind of warms people up, and people are really happy to talk about it. So that's something that you can do, is get in touch with people and just try to know more about their expertise or the topics that they are interested in. And that gets the conversation going a lot of times.
And I would add on to that, when discussing, having conversations with your network, it doesn't have to be strictly business. You can talk about sports teams that you're into, or your hobbies, or yoga class. And it's a way to build a rapport that isn't strictly sticking to business. And that's how you can connect with somebody as a human too.
That's right. So I guess that we have our very last question on Q&A, and I'm sorry from panelists, because I know that it's like 30 minutes after what we asked you to stay online. What clues do you look for to discover whether a geothermal company or firm is fit for you, both personally and professionally?
I'd say do your homework, research them, talk to people that have worked for them, look to see what's published online. Don't just go into an interview without knowing anything about the company. Go into an interview with questions that you want to get answers to.
And I would refer back to one of my first questions, I think, about corporate culture. Determine what it is like to work on the inside. Sometimes an important resource for that can be former employees, people who are currently working there. They might not be totally upfront, but a former employer or employee will tell you anything and everything. And in addition to that, I would say it's often a good thing to know about many aspects of a company. So if you're a geologist, you probably want to talk about geology all the time, but the company is huge, and they have business and law, and they're working with the government, and be interested in the whole envelope of what they're doing. I think that's really great for companies to realize that you're not just like pinholed into your one interest.
Another thing I'd like to add, this is specifically for international students, is often not all companies are good at hiring people on visas. And so it's often good to clarify that firsthand. I've had a lot of my colleagues and friends who've had this experience that they've gone through an entire interview process and then gotten a job offer, and then the company realizing that, well, they don't sponsor visas or something like that. So when while deciding, have a look at whether that company already has sponsored visas before, or are they do they have people who are on visas similar to yours? So it's kind of, it's for international students in the US, it's kind of adds to a bit of the problems, but just keep that in mind when you're looking for companies.
Awesome. So it seems that we don't have any more questions, and it was a very, very great and interactive webinar. I really appreciate all the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedule. I normally you're at conference, you're in a control room. Dr. Singh, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And Susan, thank you so much for your cooperation with us, because I know that you accepted our invitation for both resume building and this webinar. That was really great, and it's really inspiring to the students for our future generation. And I hope that one day we can invite one of them to this type of webinar, and they can teach us what was their pathway to become a professional. I appreciate everybody, and I hope that you enjoy wherever you are in the world.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to participate, and a pleasure to meet my other co-presenters. And the students gave some awesome questions, so it's good to see them engaged.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.